Scams are successful because they have perfected the art of operating below the radar, right under the noses of the authorities in every corner of the globe, using social media networks to scam and execute at lightning speed. They do it so well that people deny the fact that they can fall victim to scams, and that's exactly why they are so successful. Then there's a myth that only stupid people get scammed. There are all kinds of intelligence, though. Be that as it may, we forget that we are all members of the human race, first and foremost, and because of that, as humans, we're wired for connection and we long to feel acknowledged. Well-known psychologist Dorian Weil states that irrespective of how intellectually smart or how successful we may be in the traditional sense, we all need attention, recognition, and love. These are basic human needs. And that fact makes us all very vulnerable to scams because they artfully and very successfully exploit these needs in us because it's their full-time job. That's what they do for their day job. That's what they live to do night and day. Deception, manipulation, and theft are weaved into elaborate cyber crimes, of which scams is just one segment. And scams are successful because their power and their ability to deceive and manipulate is grossly underestimated. They are experts at developing trust over a long period of time and in alienating unsuspecting victims from their circle of influence and trust. Today, we're going to speak to a survivor of cybercrime, Gillian Goldman-Bentley. So don't go away. We will be right back. And welcome to the show. This is episode 13 of the Responsible Social Media Show. I'm your host, Brigetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and our guest today is Gillian Bentley Goldman. Gillian is a survivor of an elaborate cyber crime. Gillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brigetti, and thank you for highlighting this increasing and alarming phenomenon in the social media world. I do believe it's going to increase because of the extreme sophistication of the syndicates of scammers.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to welcome our audience on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Periscope. Welcome, everyone. I am monitoring the comments, so feel free to engage with us. And if you have any questions for Gillian, please feel free to share those questions as well. So, Gillian, tell us a little bit about who you were before the scam.
Well, I ran a highly successful public relations business in the luxury hospitality industry for the past 30 years, and I had published a few business books. And nevertheless, the reason I became involved in social media is because I wrote a novel and the publishers told me I needed a strong social media presence. Therefore, I engaged on all the relevant platforms and wrote the copy and had it presented in a professional way. And little did I know that my telephone number was also included in platforms like Facebook. This was a big mistake because it opened me to all these scammers out there who are looking profiles of people like myself.
So, it's significant to know is that this happened at a certain time of the year and you were busy publishing your book at the time. Is that right?
Yes, it is. My first novel, it's a part of a trilogy called Dark Secrets. The following is Darker Secrets, and the last one was Darkest Secret. Nothing to do with scamming, of course. Nevertheless, it was close to Christmas. Our offices were closed, as most offices do close in the country at that time, and we reopen in the early part of the new year. Christmas is not a particularly happy time in my life because I believe it's a family time, and I am lacking in that field, and so it's a particularly sad time, and a time when I had time to think and reflect, and time to be, I guess, vulnerable. Yes, the word is vulnerable, and but lonely. One has to say that, and more vulnerable to a person's um, reaching out to one for nefarious reasons.
So that's an important thing to be noticed. And I want to say welcome to Sebastian Oni from Australia, and I also want to say welcome to Karen Glaser, and she's joining us from the US. Very glad that you could join us. So this is one of the important things to note is that the scammers are particularly adept at finding people who have any kind of vulnerability. Remember, this is their day job. So if you post, and this is the reason why we need to be extra careful about what we post and how we post things on social media, because they will hone in on individuals who have some kind of vulnerability, and they're very good at looking at what you post online. They will read what you post online, and they will use that to approach you in a manner that you will not suspect. And welcome to Kathy as well. So what happened next? They established contact with you. How did this progress to the point where you became a victim of scam?
Well, it happened to me on Facebook, where a particular person claiming to be Italian but living in Camps Bay in a luxury lifestyle, always in luxury lifestyles, and they befriended me on Facebook and moved the conversation to WhatsApp and email.
So I just want, sorry to interrupt you there, because this is a very important aspect of scamming that you need to be aware of. Scammers will always meet with you on social media first, whether it's Facebook, just because Facebook is the largest platform, and that's where they mainly find people, but also be aware that Instagram, for example, is rife with scammers. It is full of fake profiles as well as Facebook. That there are thousands, literally thousands of fake profiles on the social media platforms, in addition to dating sites. And I'm not going to exclude LinkedIn as well because it happens on LinkedIn as well. So they will identify you on a social media platform and they will quickly move that conversation offline, as Gillian was saying, either onto WhatsApp or SMS, but some form of more personal communication. And then what happened, Gillian?
And then what happens is that they contact you really frequently, perhaps 3 or 4 times a day, checking in on you, sort of thing. Tell me about yourself. What colors do you like? What flowers do you like? What turns you on? What don't you like? So they are gaining information, which I gather are actually scripts written for them. So
You're absolutely right. It's very, very scripted, and that is why people underestimate them. They kind of use a system of if this, then that. So if you say something, their script will tell them what the next line is. They're extremely, in fact, the way I often describe it to people is that they put the US Army to shame. That is how professional they are in their approach.
I have to agree, because at no stage does it look like they're not they're off their game, and somehow the conversation becomes more amorous, intimate, loving. You're beautiful, you're amazing, you're what I've been dreaming about.
But I want to interrupt you there, because this is another important facet of the scamming, the art of romance scamming in particular, is that, generally when you're in a relationship, you will use terms of endearments. That's normal and that's natural. Yes. But what is different?
Well, they also use the terms of endearment. Yes, what would you like me to call you? Babe, or darling, or this sort of thing.
And but it's overly It's
overly.
overdone, isn't
It's
it?
overdone.
That is the
It's
difference.
overwhelming.
It's the in terms of endearment are overwhelming, and abnormally so. So that is what you need to recognize.
And to be
It's
careful of.
correct.
The speed that this happens is also
It's almost like
unusual.
speed dating, isn't
It's
it?
speed dating. 1 minute they look at your picture, the next minute they're in love with you, which is actually, how can you be in love with a picture? But somehow I have to say it is mind manipulation, because you want to believe it. Something in your mind, of course, says that this is completely ridiculous. And something says, but I want to believe it. It's true. So, of course, you don't go around broadcasting this to your friends and family, because if you showed them anything like this, you fear that they will tell you this is a scam. And
So that's an important. Sorry for cutting into you there.
yes,
That's an important factor. Um, and I've heard it time and again from people that I've interviewed, is that somehow you first of all, they are incredibly adept at alienating you from your circle of influence.
yes,
They will approach you in such a manner that you will trust them more than you will trust your family, and more than you will trust your real life friends. That is how good they are.
powerful.
That's how powerful the connection is that they are able to create with you. And somehow, Gillian, I'm sure you have a gut feeling, of some sorts. Why did you ignore that gut feeling, and why do you think other people ignore that gut feeling?
Well, I guess we all want to feel loved and adored and worshipped. And the one particular sentence that I do recall was that this person said, I want to take all your battles away. I am your knight in shining armor. This person happened to be allegedly Italian, so he called himself my personal Italian stallion. I'm so ridiculous. And a sensible person would never fall for it. And when I'm busy, I would also never fall for it. But it was the right time and the right place. And one also must be very careful of how you describe yourself on social media. When I think about it, I describe myself as being a golfer, loving beach walks and horses and jewelry. And I suppose that gives off an image, if you like. It projects an image of a certain kind of social standing and wealth. And of course, that is what they're looking for. They're not looking for poor people. And the intention is never to meet you. There's always a problem with meeting you. And this is where the start of the money comes into it. Because after, as you so well put it previously, they have groomed you to such a point where you would jump over a balcony for them.
That was the point, because we previously, in the previous episode, we spoke to a very well known, in fact, she's world renowned, psychologist, Dorianne Wheel. She's affectionately known as Dr. D. And she was saying that they basically use this drip technique of gradually, befriending you, indoctrinating you, winning over your trust, um, and that is basically how you fall into this trap, because you don't realize they do it so artfully, it's gradually, you don't even realize that it's happening, right?
You don't realize it's happening to you together with maybe 100 other women at the same time by the same person. It's so clever and so artful, and I have to say, exceptionally professional. They don't miss a trick. And after the grooming story comes the drama. On their way to meet you, something happens. They were caught for taxes, they were caught for drugs, they were caught for something or other. Somebody has to have an emergency operation. And they're also clever to get other people to call you, members of their family, supposedly doctors, detectives, goodness knows who.
So I want to interject you there.
Yes.
The reason why they are able to do that is that you must not underestimate the technology that they have got access to. For example, they will tell you, my child is dying, my child needs this emergency operation, and they will put the kid on the phone, but it's not the kid on the
Yes,
phone. They're using voice altering software to pretend to be that kid.
precisely. I mean, I often said to this person, you are scamming me. I know it, I feel it. And I, in fact, a few times blocked him. And then I would get a call with a Rome digit from supposedly a call from Rome saying, how dare you do this to me? It's so insulting. Nobody's ever blocked me. And other people call you. This man is in such trouble, and it's always high drama. The wife is dying of cancer. Somebody had a jumped in front of a bus and had a shocking accident, and it's all up to you to save their lives. And of course, you wonder where all their relatives, where all their friends. Nobody is available. And how clever it was for me, because I wanted a lawyer's letter drawn up that we have a loan agreement. But of course, all the lawyers are closed, all the offices are closed because it's Christmas. And this particular person told me his Standard Bank private banking account had been hacked, and they wanted to see him in South Africa in order to reopen the account. And of course, promises to pay you back with interest and before you know it, you're unraveling in this terrible web of deception that you don't, at the end of it, know who you are. You don't dare tell anybody about this because, of course, you know that they're going to laugh at you. Um, and you fear that yourself, of course. Um, it's the most troubling, dangerous, and horrible exercise to get into. And once you're involved in this web, it's terribly hard to recover from it.
And of course, you create this phantom relationship that you don't realize is phantom because to you it feels real. You've now created this relationship with a picture of the Italian stallion, as you call him. This perfect looking man or perfect looking woman. But in reality, behind that perfect looking man or woman is another person who has been scammed, someone who is now a victim of identity theft because they've stolen that image. And as I mentioned in the beginning, when they steal pictures of people, they are able to create roughly on average between 3,000 and 3,500 new fake Facebook profiles with just one single image. That is staggering. It's absolutely frightening that they can create that amount of fake profiles from just one picture. And the other thing that they're able to do is they will then do a video call with you and use a video image of that person to try and convince you that you are speaking to the real person.
Correct.
Do not underestimate the intelligence of these people or the technology that they have got access to.
Yes, it's far beyond any of our technology, let's say. And they will even send you pictures or images of a passport or a business flight, a card, a ticket. They're able to recreate any kind of image within minutes that comes to you, which I even had a document from the Italian police allegedly to say that he owes me X amount of money, which will be paid back immediately on arrival with 50% interest. Um, and I could then get a car of my choice, jewelry, God knows what. And as a gift, he would like to buy me an apartment, of course, in Camps Bay. I don't know where Camps Bay comes into this, but it does enter the picture a lot in these scams, which I must confess to you seem to be located not in Camps Bay, but in Cape Town. The syndicates, I'm told there are three extremely dangerous syndicates, Nigerian controlled in Cape Town, in an area called Table View, particularly so.
I just want to acknowledge a comment here by Kathy, and she was saying it's amazing how Facebook has got the ability to delete legitimate pages but allows scammers to remain even if they are reported. This seems to be a huge challenge because Facebook seems to use their AI to communicate with users and identify pages, and somehow it would appear that the AI is faulty. It's not working very well if legitimate pages are getting deleted by Facebook, but so many millions of scam pages are there because they are so well connected on the social media platforms that if one profile gets deleted, they've got thousands to spare. They don't really care if one is they've already got them pre-built. They'll just simply switch to another one. The other problem also that, and we're singling out Facebook in this instance because it's the largest social media platform. Basically, the reason why they can do this is because they can send out unlimited friend requests. There's no limit on friend requests. So it's like the old email, phishing emails
Yes.
has been replaced with sending friend requests. So
Sending friend
in the same way that you used to get thousands of emails before from scammers, you're now getting these thousands and thousands of friend requests being sent out on Facebook to connect with people with the intention to deceive them and to manipulate them and to
steal their
defraud
money.
them and steal their money. That is why they do it. And so as users of the social media platforms, we need, as I think we tend to forget that as users, some the social media platforms have gone to great lengths to sell us the notion and the message that they are a powerhouse and that we would be losing out. But we forget that as users, we have got a great measure of power. And I believe that the direction we should go into is that as users, we need to start demanding that the social media platforms create a safe environment for us on which to operate. They need to provide us with verified accounts because if we have verified accounts, then the scammers cannot open. I was gobsmacked, Gillian, to find out the amount of Facebook accounts that exists for children under the age of 13, bearing in mind that Facebook says you need to be 13 years old to have an account. There are millions of accounts of children under the age of 13. Why? Because accounts are not verified. And that is what enables scammers to be so prolific on the platform. So we need to start asserting ourselves and saying we want verified accounts so we can keep ourselves safe.
Good.
We don't want Facebook to go away. We love Facebook, right? But
Look,
we just
all
want them to
social
be
media,
we want them to be responsible. That's what we want.
all social media platforms have their place, but one must be very cautious. And it seems to be certain professions are chosen, like oil rigs. Anybody on an oil rig, or in Afghanistan, or the American Army, I don't know, they like these sort of things, where they get into deep difficulties getting off the rig or on the rig or something like that. They have absolutely no intention whatsoever of meeting the person.
Correct.
It is that this is absolutely irrelevant. The irrelevancy is to capture the person's attention and then start alienating them from their bank accounts. So that is it. In the hard nut of a truth, that is it. And that's what I realized till I eventually had financial difficulties myself and found myself really in the street. I was on the street and ended up in a shelter.
And you know, if somebody else told you that this is what happened to them, what would you think?
I'd say it's impossible. Then you're a fool. In fact, just on this note, I must tell you that it's not uncommon that one's family and friends are the first to criticize and to alienate themselves from this person who seems to have taken leave of their senses. I do have a friend who this very minute is being scammed by, of course, a Spanish man, tall, dark, good looking, from Camps Bay, yes, but also has a helicopter and so on in the south of Spain, but is building a bridge in Lesotho. It's all a bizarre story. Thus far, she has given him 16 million rand, a house, a diamond watch, paid for all his medical expenses. And if you told her she was being scammed, she will see you to the door because she does not believe it. And that's the whole issue here. They are so clever at overtaking your emotions and feelings that you do believe it, although you have your moments where you say this can't be true, but you do believe it. You want to believe. No, the issue is you want to believe it. So what you want to do
What
happens.
you know you need to do and what you actually do are two different things, because
Absolutely.
people forget that you're human at the end of the day with human feelings. And as we mentioned in the beginning, we all have this longing for connection, for recognition, acknowledgement. And of course, if somebody flatters you all the time, your human side is going to kick in above your intellectual knowledge, for example. Um, you know,
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a fool. I'm a university graduate, and that's even more unforgivable because, in the aftermath, when people ask you about this, there is some kind of shame, of course, and stigma to it that one was um, being scammed out of millions in my case. Because I thought if I stop giving this person money, then I'll never get anything back. And I really believed it. That he would step off the plane, we would go straight to the bank, he'd pay me back, I'd get my Aston Martin, and wow. And we'd go off to Tiffany's for jewelry. I mean, it's impossible, but it happened to me, so it is possible. And I'm considered to be quite a cautious person. So I intend, with the rest of the career that's left to me, to run workshops, really to show people, especially those of us who are over 40, who did not grow up with computers and laptops and phones and goodness knows what, and to show them the techniques and to help them, to prevent them from falling into the same dreadful trap. And I must tell you that officialdom in this particular country, it does not help at all, because the police are very reluctant to accept these kind of cases. They don't understand cybercrime. They say, unless somebody was holding a gun to your head, how come you transferred money to some stranger?
I just want to interject there. That's a very important point that you mentioned. And we've mentioned this before as well, is that, you can be a professional person and you can be a pilot, you can be a teacher, you can be a medical doctor, you can be a psychologist, but that doesn't mean that you are trained in cybercrime. And that's the difference.
That's correct.
You and I are not trained in cybercrime, and that is why it's so easy for us to become victims. And that is why it doesn't mean that you are stupid because you got caught. You just are not trained in cybercrime.
It never occurred to me it wasn't the picture of the person on the profile. I didn't know you could do that. I mean, of course you can do it, but I didn't believe it.
I just want to quickly answer. Sebastian asked the question earlier about the video. Let me find that comment very quickly. You asked it. How is it possible to come across a video and not to be caught by the fact that it's fake? Because they're so clever, Sebastian, what they'll do is they will play a section of the video, and generally they will explain to the person that they're translating because, English isn't good or whatever. And they'll play just a short segment and then they will say, they will scramble the video and say, oh, our signal's bad. So they'll play just a short enough segment for you to see the person and see the person talking, and then they'll scramble it and say, sorry, signal bad, we need to do a telephone call now. And that's how they do it.
Their skill should not be underestimated. They are extremely clever with spyware and technology that we've never even heard of. I believe the Nigerian skill with cybercrime and this kind of very serious crime is phenomenal. And it's particularly easy in this country to do because of the absence of really very strong law enforcement agencies like the FBI or US Secret Service. And even in England, people get caught. Scammers get caught, and even some of the money gets recovered. But it's laundering of money. It's all sorts of things going on.
It's an elaborate scheme, and you need to realize that this is not a sidekick for scammers. This is their day job. They do this full time. They've got nothing else but to focus on deceiving and defrauding people in elaborate schemes, very, very elaborate schemes. A lot of them are university graduates. The
Yes,
kingpins, they're not stupid people.
by all
So
means.
don't be fooled at all. But Gillian, I want to talk a little bit of how did this, what were some of the effects that it's had on you personally after being scammed?
Well, it was exceptionally alarming, and I felt my whole life was unraveling, with it pretty well in place at that stage. Um, I didn't feel at all good mentally, psychologically, and of course, I was homeless. I've never been homeless in my life. My family abandoned me. I was sitting at police stations and hospitals, hoping to be admitted, frankly. And then I ended up in a shelter near a place called Pretoria, um, where they're actually running a different scam of defrauding people of their pensions and their grants and giving them rotten food and treating them as if they were in a concentration camp. So I spent 10 months in such a place. And that's a very, very sobering experience. And I intend to expose these people at the highest to the highest authorities. They will be closed and banned because nobody should be fall prey to that sort of thing because it's truly, truly scandalous.
And so my next question to you is, Gillian, if any of your relatives are watching this, because in many cases, and it's happened to you, your relatives have turned their backs on you. So if your
Correct.
relatives are watching this, what do you want to say to them?
My relatives happen to be financially very successful. I would say to them, give a moment of thought that you're not, that it could never happen to you because it can. Anything can happen to you. Don't be so arrogant to believe that such a, an apparent, a transparent thing could happen to you. It can happen to anybody in the sneakiest of ways. And I think the fact that relatives abandon a person and friends, so-called friends, it's really tragic, especially when the time is when you need them most. Because if you would show them what happened, they would laugh at you. And laughing it's no laughing matter. The only people who are not surprised by this are the psychiatrists because they see 3 or 4 women a week on this very subject. Psychiatrists and psychologists have seen this all before. They know how it works and they know just how clever these people are. And what a very dangerous thing it is because so many women, I have to say, only 5% of them worldwide report this to the police because of humiliation and shame and the stigma attached.
So that's a big point as well, is that currently it's underreported because of the shame that's attached to it.
Yes.
And also, there are not enough, in fact, there are no documented studies of the effects that a scam has on a person. And because there's not enough studies being done, there are no protocols for taking care of people who've been scammed. There's no protocols for psychologists.
No.
There's no protocols for police services. And there should be, because when a person has been scammed, you need to enter into a treatment program
Yes.
to help you cope with it psychologically. But
Yes.
also, you need to be able to report it to the police in a dignified manner, not in a manner, because currently what's happening is people, when they report it, they are shamed. They are first, some police officers will not even take a report. We've had
Correct.
instances of where people were told by the police, laughed at by the police. They
Happened
were
to me.
told that they are not debt collectors, and
Yes,
then
happened to
they
me.
refused to open the case. So all those protocols still need to be established.
Of course, they need to be established because you asked me what effect. Well, from a person who is very confident and on top of their game, I lost all my self-confidence and self-esteem. I see a question here. How did I survive a shelter?
Yeah, I'd
moment
like you to
by
just,
moment.
answer that question by
Wow, that
Rita. Yeah.
that is a terrible experience that could happen to anybody. In these shelters, I must tell you, there's not only people who be scammed, that's unusual. There are people who've been retrenched, they can't find work, and they fondly call the shelter the farm. It's actually a plot far away from civilization, where there's no television, there's no communication with anybody. So they treat the people with a certain arrogance, not a certain arrogance, a definite arrogance, and cruelty. There were people who were deaf and dumb girls in one of the places I was at who were mentally retarded, and they were often beaten up, and they had a feeling of the job I was trained to do, and I had a very good camera, a telephone camera, and I was taking pictures of this. They confiscated my camera and replaced it with a cheap um, model that doesn't take pictures. And then they fined you for ridiculous things, for crossing the wrong line or something. It is an absolute scandal, and I will make sure that this is exposed in this country. I'm not sure about shelters worldwide, but certainly in South Africa, this is a very common thing. And I understand from people around that they are all operating on similar principles. They accept food donations and they accept clothing donations, which they resell, and the food they keep for themselves, and the people are given dry bread and 2-minute noodles or something.
So I want to corroborate what you're saying, because we had a guest on the show previously, uh, a lady by the name of Pietro, and she exposed a similar thing. She also wrote to me telling me about the awful conditions in the shelters. I think in one of the shelters she was in, they were only allowed to bath 3 times a week.
Yes.
Only 3 times a week were they allowed to
and
bath.
They were only fed 3 times a week.
And they were not, they were not given. And I think one of the things she mentioned is that they were receiving donations from big corporate companies, for
Yes.
example, made donations to these shelters. And then, but the food and the clothing that were donated never actually reached the intended recipients.
I would also like to add that they call themselves care centers. There's no possibility of even a band-aid in one of these places, and many people die unnecessary deaths there because nothing is recognized, and the people are treated like scum. And it takes an ambulance, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours to reach this place, and only called at the last moment. It's truly a scandal of the highest order and must be exposed in the highest government responsible sector. And I will make it my business to do that, because I was evicted from one shelter because I was dressing too nicely, or it's not a fashion parade, and went to a worse one. And another lady who was dropped off by social services, who was colored, was evicted the next day because of her color. And they're far right-wing people, and they are people you have never, ever come across in your life before, making themselves a fortune out of poverty.
So Sebastian asks, how are they approved? Sebastian, I don't know. They simply exist. And I actually personally called a social worker and I asked them, how is it possible that people can live in such appalling conditions? And she said, that she said she eventually just gave up because there was no point in fighting the system any longer, and she literally turns off her emotions and has to, for her own sanity, turn a blind eye. But she was very much aware of the conditions that I raised. It's just that she said she got to a point where she was so exhausted trying to get the attention of the authorities. So it's a very, very real and sad problem. Gillian, what's next for you?
What's next for me is another book. This won't be a novel. This is a book on being scammed, and tips for people. As much as it is very attractive and very alluring to become involved with such a sort of a person and image online, the dangers are really too great. A book, and then next I'm giving these workshops, and people over 40 have to attend, because those are the people that they are looking for. That lady you mentioned, Petra, worked for 20 years. It's unbelievable. She worked in the forensic department of one of the largest banks here. And she said they didn't work with cybercrime, so they didn't know about this kind of thing, which it's phenomenal. She lost her
It's
whole
staggering,
pension.
isn't it? Totally staggering.
She lost her pension to the scammer. And furthermore, she couldn't get him arrested because she knew where he lived and knew his number and knew everything. And you mustn't forget how things work in this country, and I'm not afraid to say that. If money is exchanged, anything can be done. You can open a shelter, you can pay a scammer can pay the police, etc., etc. So you are forced to go to a private detective, pay them another fortune to go and catch the scammer, put them in jail, and God knows what next time they're walking out in the streets, and paid somebody in the prison to get out. So it really is a very, very dangerous thing, and we must do everything possible to help people who are, I must say, lonely, or it seems a safe environment, that phone in front of you or the laptop, but it's not safe at all.
So I think we are going to and Sprit.
Yes,
Rita Sprit is saying, can we help her out of the shelter?
have.
She has been helped out of the shelter. But, you know, again, even though she's been helped out of the shelter, she, like everyone else who's been through this process, is in dire need of psychiatric and psychological support.
Yes.
We don't have the protocols yet. We need to develop the protocols, but every single person who's had an experience of being scammed needs psychological support. I don't know what the solution is. We need to help people that end up in shelters. We need to help people get help, you know, to get back onto their feet. I don't know if we should start a GoFundMe or something, but we need to start arming ourselves with information about how scams work, and we need to educate ourselves and realize that this danger is, you know, irrespective of who we are, we can still fall victim. They are, you know, again, I want to reiterate, you're not getting scammed by one person, you get scammed by a syndicate that operates 24/7. They've got tentacles all over the world. Very often they operate right under the noses of the authorities and intelligence agencies that are that brazen, that are that organized. They operate below the radar. They are experts in doing that. So if they can operate below the radar and they can operate within range of intelligence agencies, what makes you think that you are clever enough to evade or escape their tentacles? You're not. Everyone, if we are active on social media, we can fall victim. So we need to lock down our social media accounts. We don't want Facebook to go away. We don't want other social media platforms to go away. We simply want them to practice responsible social media, to verify accounts, to close the doors that allow scammers to open millions of fake accounts, to verify accounts, so we can shut the door, so we can have a safe environment on Facebook, we can have a safe environment on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on the dating sites. We just want them to lock it down and to verify accounts so that we can prevent the scammers from plying their trade, because it's the anonymity on the social media platforms that permit them to ply their trade.
That's quite true. I must tell you at this juncture that Facebook came out very badly and had to pay many millions of dollars to Israel for promoting and carrying Hezbollah and other Palestinian groups' messages, and hastening their intention to destroy innocent people. And Facebook fought this to the end. And in a class action suit last year, they were found guilty. So more of us must pay attention to this, because it's not going to go away. It's a very easy way to make money. And if you've got these kind of people who are very clever out there with their technology, making very easy money with nobody to apprehend them, this is going to continue in an even more frightening way.
We're out of time. I want to thank each one of you for joining us today. Gillian, thank you for sharing your experience and your story. And to you, the viewers on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Periscope, and on Twitch, I want to say thank you very much for joining us live. And to those watching on the replay, thank you for watching as well. And remember, let's become responsible. Let's practice responsible social media. Let's educate ourselves. Let's create awareness, one conversation at a time. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again soon. From me, Bridget Limban in Cape Town, it's goodbye for now.